first I do want to let everyone know, I already let you know once, bathrooms are back there, so you gotta go just get up. There's drinks and some snacks back there, so help yourself.
Much. I don't want to get ice.
Okay. Thanks for coming out. Even though it's kind of snowy and cold this morning. So my name's Jennifer, and I am, like Cindy said, I'm a registered nurse, wellness coach, and I do addiction education. And until 7 years ago, or as of 7 years ago, I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict as well. You know, when I got sober, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, why I couldn't stop drinking or doing drugs. So I went to treatment, and there I learned that I had a disease called addiction. So you might think, what does that mean? What does addiction mean? So I Googled it, right? And so according to Google and Wikipedia, Urban Dictionary, and Webster, it's considered a state characterized by compulsive engagement of a repeated stimulus or addictive stimulus. Over time, it becomes a brain disorder. So it is considered a disease in the medical field as that. I want to do a quick survey with everyone here. So anyone who's had chocolate cake, I want you to raise your hand. Okay, so just about everybody, right? All right, so everybody here has had chocolate cake before, and when you ate that chocolate cake, did you think, ugh, that was disgusting, I don't ever want to do that again? Or were you like, oh my God, that was amazing, I can't wait to do it again? Right, so that was my idea, right? That was my reaction too.
I was regretting saying
Yeah. Right. So that's kind of what it's like for an alcoholic or an addict when they first start off. And as their disease progresses, that craving becomes stronger and stronger to that addictive stimuli. And that addictive stimuli can be anything. It can be a substance, it can be a thing or an activity. And we're going to kind of go over a bunch of that today so you can get a better picture. I think for myself, when I thought of an addict, there used to be this commercial that shows this kid running, right? And they're chasing him. You think he's a runner at first, and then it's the police chasing him, and it says, I never wanted to be a drug addict. That's what I thought a drug addict, you know, those living on the streets kind of people. And it can be anyone, and it can be an addiction to anything. We talked about the cell phones, that's an addiction, right? The pings and everything, it sets off something in the brain, and we're like looking at our phones, so. I will mention today about AA 12-step programs, and the reason I do is because that's how I got sober and that's how I stay sober. I know that that's helped a lot of other people get sober. But I do want to just mention, this is kind of my disclaimer, it's not the only way. And I know other people who've gotten sober other ways, but it's the one I'm most familiar with, and I know that it works, so that's what I want to share with you today. Let's see, I think I'll just tell you a little bit of my story, because I think we all have one. And I think mine's a good example of the disease of addiction and how it progresses. So kind of starting off, I started drinking, smoking weed when I was 12 years old. And I drink alcoholically from the second time I ingested alcohol. And I say that because, once I started, I couldn't stop. It always made me feel so much better about myself. And it was just something that I searched out for a long time. I lost my train of thought there. And so from that, it was a way for me to feel better about myself. And it became a coping skill for me from an early age. And during an age when that's what you're trying to figure out, how to cope with life. And so it quickly became that for me. And I did that for about 30 years until the age of 42 when I came back to St. Louis. I'm not in St. Louis, but when I went back to St. Louis and got sober. Now, I was a very high-functioning alcoholic and addict, and I say that because over those years, my addiction would switch. So for a while, it would be beer, and then I was into the breweries and, domestic and imported beers. And then I was a wine connoisseur for a while. Or so I thought, these are all in my head, but I switched to that. And then I would switch to hard liquor and just kind of switch around from that. Dirty martinis, one of my go-to drinks, Captain Morgan. And weed, but then it also included schooling. So I went to school, I got an undergraduate, and then I went back 5 years later and I got my degree for nursing, for a registered nurse, and then a couple years later I got my massage therapy certificate, and then I moved a gazillion times. In St. Louis alone, over 15 years, I moved 11 times. That's a lot of moving. And then I did a big geographical move, which does happen with addicts. They'll do this big geographical move because you're always searching. You're always trying to fill that void in you, or trying to find something. And so I moved to California. And then even there, I started doing travel nursing, which I was doing geographical or moving from hospital to hospital for every 3 months. So you can see, I had a lot of different addictions. I forgot where I was going to go with this. So anyway, so I was in California and just started moving around a lot. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Hold on, give me 1 second.
You're not the only one, girl.
Yeah.
I can do this.
Oh yeah. So I drank for any reason. So I drank if I was happy or I was sad or lonely. I drank because you were happy or sad or lonely. Right? It didn't matter. I had to do it. It started to become my obsession. And because this is put on by the LGBT, I buried a lot of secrets under a lot of alcohol and drugs. One of them was my sexuality. So in my late 20s, I became interested in women. I was bisexual, and I got into a relationship. It lasted 7 years. It was very complicated, and I didn't tell anybody about it until I got sober. And that's just one of the many secrets. And I've talked to a lot of people, and I say that because there's always, anyone I've talked to who's in recovery, there's always these few little things that they drink over and drink over and drink over until you can face them. So that's where I was. Now, addiction is considered a progressive fatal disease. And I haven't met anyone yet who hasn't progressed either to death or they've gotten sober. And that's where mine was headed. I was definitely headed down that road of the fatal part. And I want to show you a picture. I did pretty well for 28 years. Like I said, I was pretty high functioning. And then last two, but really the last year, things really went downhill. I think addiction has phases. And I was in kind of just all of a sudden, and I don't know why or when, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. I just took a turn down to that final stage where I was a successful ER nurse living in St. Louis. I hung out with doctors and nurses and paramedics and firefighters. I'm in California, it's 2008, and I am homeless, I'm penniless, and just really quite sickly. And I'm going to show you a picture. It's kind of disturbing, but this is what happens when we're unable to get sober.
Oh my gosh.
Right, so I look at that picture and I think, wow, definitely not what I intended, but this is where I ended up. This is where my disease took me. It took me that far. And I think, the thing was I couldn't stop using, couldn't stop drinking. I didn't know why, and it really didn't matter about the consequences. I just kept doing it and not understanding what was happening with me. So what happened? So what happened was I was in California, I'm homeless, I'm telling myself, I finally, it was Thanksgiving Day, 2008, and I had just a moment of clarity where I didn't have any money, so I didn't have any more drugs left, and I didn't have any alcohol. But I just had this moment of clarity, and I remember I was just crying. I was so upset, and I kept thinking, I just need someone to come save me. I just kept repeating that, and finally I was like, just get up and save yourself, right? And so, as addicts do, 2 weeks later I made a phone call. And that was to Karen, who will be here a little bit later, a good friend of mine. And I called her, I told her, listen, this is what's going on with me, and I need some help. Luckily, her idea of help and my idea of help are totally different. Thank goodness. So this was my plan. My plan was, and I'm living in LA, I look like this. I think I'm like, so great, and living the dream. I'm in Hollywood, and I'm going to clubs, and and I had convinced myself that nobody else knew what was happening, and obviously that's not a good picture. So I wasn't. I weighed about 100 pounds. I was malnutritioned. I was just really emotionally and mentally and spiritually just broken, and not broken, but just really beat down. So I call her, and I'm like, yeah, I'm having troubles, I need to get out of LA for a few days, and so my idea was I'd leave LA for a couple days, get all the drugs and the alcohol out of my system, cha-ching, bada bing, I'm a new person, life is great, just go back to LA, start living my life again, right? So that was not her plan. So she hung up the phone with me, called a friend of mine in St. Louis, who then called my family, and honestly, 2 days later, they were in LA. So my two brothers, my brother-in-law, and Karen came to get 100-pound me out of LA, which, at the time I was annoyed. I'm like, why are all of you here? But the thing was, they were scared because nobody had seen me for about probably 4 months at least. I kept calling. I would call random hours, and it would just be like nonsensical. I'd leave them messages, or I would be talking nonsensical, and so they were really scared, and they didn't really know what they were going to be walking into. So what happened is they came and got me and brought me back to St. Louis, and I went into treatment. And when I got into treatment, a lot of things happened for me. First, I learned that I had this disease of addiction, which was a relief because I didn't know why, especially being a nurse. In nursing school, I went to one AA meeting, and in that meeting, I took notes because I had to do a paper on it. So I really, there was minimal education there on addiction. So I learned that. I learned that when I ingest alcohol or drugs, it processes differently in my body and in my brain than other people. I learned that once I started, I wasn't able to stop. And it didn't matter how much I wanted to stop. It didn't matter what the consequences, and it certainly didn't matter about my health. I just couldn't stop. I also learned about AA and the 12-step program, which has been, it's done a lot for me. First of all, it helped me to stop drinking and told me why, but it gave me better coping skills, right? Because my old coping skills became, because I did start at such a young age, it became something happened in my life, I drink or I get high. That was kind of, like I said earlier, it didn't matter why. So I had to learn some new coping skills. And one of the things that AA does, and there's Dr. Kevin McCauley talks about this, is it focuses on the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make all our decisions and our choices. And so the program actually helps to rewire that so that now, life happens. It's happened to me in sobriety. I've had some tragic things happen. I've lost some friends to this disease. But I never drank over it, and I didn't use. So I had different coping skills almost within the first 6 months. Actually, I had a friend pass away after a year of sobriety. And what I did was, I did other things. I called people in the program, and I went to meetings and helped somebody. Service work is a big thing. So it helped me with that, and it made me a better person. It helped me heal from the inside out. And I'm a better person today. I'm a better person to myself, and a better person to my family and friends. Basically a better person to the general public, because when I got sober, I was pissed. I was pissed at myself. I was ashamed of everything I had done. I was angry. people were scared of me, they said, because I was so angry and I didn't want anyone to talk to me. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And so, you know, it's really just changed everything that I've done. And I, you know, don't want to harp on it too much. Oh, hey, no. But it is good. And I think the main thing, though, is to be able to have people that understand addiction. And it is a baffling disease. It's baffling for the person that has it. I think it's even more baffling for people that don't. Because, you know, why would I, you know, looking like that, why would I keep doing it? And it's just, there's something, it is a brain disorder. And so you gotta interject that. You know, I came to basically a fork in the road. And I had to make a decision. Either I was gonna go on to the end. And before I got sober, months before that, I kept telling people I was hanging out with, I'm like, I'm gonna die from this if I don't stop. So I knew it, and I think a lot of addicts do. And when somebody does die from this disease, it was never their intention. Their intention was probably just to get high. And that's not always the case, but majority of the time. And they just don't know how. So I'm glad you guys are here today to kind of learn a little bit more about it. Just because, you know, anyone can kind of put the bug in your ear. My friend Karen, 6 months early, before I got sober, maybe the year before, you know, it was like, you don't have to continue on with this. And she always was there for me. And so I still had that, was able to reach out to her when I was ready to do it. I think I'll just end with this. So the treatment center I went to and then later worked at, the program director there said to clients and staff, and he still says it, he said, you know, you're not a bad person who's trying to become good, you're a sick person that's trying to become well. Okay. That's all I got for right now.